Welcome to the Humanist Community in Silicon Valley Sunday Forum. My name is Alex Havsey. I'm a member of the Humanist community. The Humanist community is a chapter of the American Humanist Association, and humanism is a reality-based philosophy of life that affirms our ability and responsibility to lead ethical lives of personal fulfillment that aspire to the greater good. We value freedom, health, happiness, and using science and reason to acquire and apply knowledge. A special welcome for those who are with us for the first time. We invite you to continue listening to our weekly forums and other events which are listed on our website. Also, please help us to continue presenting these forums free to the public by donating to the Humanist Community at our website, which is www.humanist.org. That's humanist plural. Okay, racism is with a lot of negative connotations. But we don't have a complete picture of what racism is. Emmett Pan will analyze racism to find the causes. Basically, racism is the intersection of three psychological dynamics. Discomfort caused by differences, different treatment due to power differences, and mistreatment due to problematic human desires. We'll examine these dynamics in detail. Afterwards, you may understand racism better, and you may understand yourself differently. Emma Pant is a humanist and a member of the humanist community. She spent a lot of time thinking, observing, and analyzing the problems of our society. She came to the U.S. as an Asian teenager, and even though she ventured into many groups of white people during the first 3 decades in the U.S., the word racism rarely entered her mind. She didn't really know enough about it. So she was drawn to every discussion on racism she knew, but found them unsatisfactory. After 5 decades in the U.S., she began to see a pattern of racism that nobody talked about. She wants to share her observations with the world. So, Emma.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Can you guys see the slide?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Okay, so I modified the topic slightly. I call it racism from condemnation to awareness. This is my agenda. It's different from what I originally intended, and that's what Alex just said. I decided this is a better way to discuss racism. So I'm going to give an introduction, and I will explain a few terminology and concepts related to racism. And then I'm going to talk about different types of mistreatment due to racism, and then the benefit of diversity. And the last is how to use understanding to gain awareness. So our society normally take a condemning approach to racism. Racism is bad, racism is unethical, and racist pick, right? And when the society talk about racism, we only talk about a few situations like police brutality, lack of opportunity or promotion, like hateful acts. And in fact, racism is much more broad than these few situations. And there's a big lack of understanding on the dynamic of racism. What contribute to racism? Another thing I think it's important to know is racism is part of the human nature. Human nature has a bright side and has a side that's not so bright, and racism fall into the side that's not so bright. And we need to be aware about racist tendency in order to control this part of human nature. So this is my goal of the discussion, is to bring some awareness. And why do I want to talk about racism? I want to share my experience and my understanding. I I'm kind of adventurous person. So I've been to a lot of white group that I'm only minority over there. And my experience, of course, is positive, negative. There are some negative experience that I didn't quite know how to explain it. So it took me many years for me to understand because I see the patterns. Um, so the patterns I see actually is not unique to me. Uh, it has been studied and written down by people who study human psychology, study racism, organization psychology. Okay. And I just feel that, people need to know this. And I also want to help other minorities to understand their own negative experience with the majority. And because our society doesn't talk about racism enough, and minorities have a tendency to develop feelings of inadequacy because when they see something wrong and wrong into a negative situation repeatedly, they may blame themselves or they may think that they are not good enough to deal with the situation because nobody else talk about this problem. So, and I also want to kind of warn you that this talk can be difficult for you to listen to. When I do research for this talk, I run into quite a few concepts. I say, really? Okay, so it took me a while to absorb these concepts. So I don't expect you to absorb what I tell you today either. And racism is also a very emotional topic. It can trigger a lot of negative feelings and memories inside of us. When I was preparing for this presentation, I kept on distracting myself until I realized, oh, I have a lot of feelings about this subject, and I have to clear my feelings before I can focus on it. So another thing I have observed in people is that people have this attitude. If I have never heard of this problem before, then it doesn't exist. The assumption is that we have heard all the problem in the world already, and there's no new problem. And I don't think that's true because there are problems that exist, but people don't want to talk about it. The reason they don't want to talk about it is because it will upset people, so they don't want to talk. And another difficulty you might have is my way of the talking. I look for pattern and I think about patterns, mostly because I'm an immigrant and I have to figure out the cultural difference. So I tend to be very general with words. Okay. So when I use the word minority, I don't mean every single minority. I mean the majority of minorities or most of the minorities. When I use the word white, it doesn't mean every single white. I mean the majority of white. Okay. So my language is somehow imprecise and I may offend you and make you feel bad. So I just want to apologize in front. And now we are moving on to a few terminologies and concepts related to racism.
I have
Privilege.
a question.
Yes,
You don't support racism, right?
of course not.
Okay, that's good. Just wanted to ask a question. I'm sorry for interrupting you, girl.
Okay. All right. So when I tell people that I was going to give a presentation on racism, especially white people, their immediate reaction is, oh, this is a very difficult subject.
Hey, my name is Layla, and nice to meet you.
Okay, so uh, I think why it's so difficult to discuss racism is because it involves privilege. And people tend to see privilege as a zero-sum game. One racist gain is not a racist loss. Okay, so it's not a good way to see privilege. If we eliminate privilege, I think it's everybody's gain because it makes the world fairer and happier. I can tell you people who don't have privilege are not so happy about the fact that they have to work so hard to get whatever they want. So they are, but once we get rid of the privilege, the world will be a happier world. So next concept I want to talk about is called group identity. There are two different kinds of group identity. One is called affiliation identity. The other one is called passive identity. Oh, is there a question for me? Isabella has a question for me?
Yes. I don't really support the thing that Layla has going on, saying she loves Satan. I feel kind of harassed right now. I don't really like that how she is supporting this while we are talking about racism.
Okay. All right. So affiliation identity is something we emotionally buy in. Okay. And it gives us a sense of
Comment and like I don't like it. Like it. Like it.
I put Lalila loves Satan in the waiting room. How about this one? The one. Shut up. Okay, Lalila's in the waiting room too. Okay, she won't interrupt again. Bella and Layla love Satan.
okay, I can continue. All right. So this identity is the identity I use in this presentation. There's another kind of identity called passive identity. And this identity is given to us from other people. For example, I have the identity of an Asian woman. When I look at other Asian women, I see tons of differences. Okay. But when other people look at us Asian women, they only see Asian women. And therefore, we've been treated very similarly. So in a way, it becomes my identity in a way that I share similar treatment with all these people. But we don't talk about this kind of identity. I just want to mention there are this kind of identity. So the next concept is in-group versus out-group. In-group is the group we emotionally identify with. Out-group is the group that outside our in-groups. People usually want to feel good about themselves. So they tend to see the good things about their own group. And they are blind to the problems of their own group. And when they look at the out group, the reverse is true. People tend to see the problems of the out group and not so much on the good things of the other group, unless it's extremely obvious. Now I'm going to show you a few pictures. This person's mouth is tilted because he has Bell's palsy, also called facial paralysis. This person also have Bell's palsy. And so is this person. So if you meet these people in a social situation, would you like to talk to them? The chances are you probably don't feel comfortable. Okay, because appearance affect us. We feel uncomfortable with look That's very different and very unusual. Okay. And because the discomfort, we avoid these people. And different degrees of difference also affect how they are being avoided. For example, this person is probably less avoided than this person, and then this person, because this person's Bell's palsy is not as serious. Okay, and the difference can be due to a physical defect, like missing certain parts about body, can be different way of dressing, like men dress as a woman, different communication style. Okay, like some communication style is very direct, some communication style is more subtle. That can all cause a feeling of discomfort. And then discomfort leads to avoidance. So you avoid people with different race, then they become marginalized. Once they feel they are marginalized, they stop participating. And acceptance is the opposite of marginalization. And there are two levels of acceptance. One is surface acceptance. You're polite. You allow them to participate in your event. Another level is core acceptance, that they feel they are trusted. And they feel they are included in your information network outside conversation, which means like after the meeting, people want to talk to them. Or they feel they have influence of the group. It's when people feel they are accepted in this core acceptance, then they feel a real acceptance. Okay, and they'll be willing to stay. I have seen this before. People coming to say my group, they are very nice, make a lot of contribution, but they are minority. So people at first try to be welcoming and they talk to them. But after a while, that effort kind of died down. And they realized they were often standing by themselves after the meeting and they stopped attending. So they have the surface acceptance, but they didn't have the core acceptance for them to stay. The next concept is called feelings of affinity, which I'm sure you heard before. It's a natural liking. It's an emotional connection. And it comes with the past positive experience with a race. And it leads to empathy. So it's very important. The feelings of affinity leads to feelings of empathy. For our in-group members, we have feelings of affinity. But for the out-group, not so much. Okay, what that means is we have feelings of empathy toward our in-group members. We don't have that much for the out-group people. And the feelings of affinity is not two ways. The majority may not have much of feelings of affinity toward the minority due to a lack of exposure because they are smaller in number. The minority, however, can have feelings of affinity toward the majority because they have exposed to them far more. Like they see them in TV, they are the teachers, they are the professors, they are the managers, they see far more of them. So then another important concept was when we discuss racism is power. And there are different kinds of power: physical power, intellectual power, resource power, like, money, or positional power, like, a manager have power over his subordinates. People without resource power tend to have the habit of monitoring their own behavior. And people with resource power has less empathy and has much less need to monitor their own behavior because they feel less of a consequence. Their resource can deal with whatever consequence that is. And there is status. If a group is associated with high status, people is going to assume competence early. If they see the signs of competence early, they will give them more attention and give them more opportunities. If a group is associated with lower status, people may not give them trust right away. It will take them a while to give them the trust. I actually have seen this myself. A minority takes many years to have a key position in an organization. But for a white person, it doesn't take that long. Okay, so that's delayed trust. They are being scrutinized more. They may miss and undervalue signs of good quality, means other people don't read them very accurately. And this falls into a category of evaluation, which I'm going to talk more about later. So there's the inhibition of impulse. Sorry. And so we monitor our behavior according to social norm. We use inhibition as a force to counter our improper desire, right? We all need to behave well in a situation when we are being evaluated by other people. But when we see a face, a different race that we have no feelings of affinity with, our inhibition becomes lower. And when that happens, that increases the chance that we become abusive. Okay, so inhibition is very important. So there is a threat, there is this idea of a threat. A threat is a perceived loss of a power and esteem.
Shut the fuck up.
We got another Zoom bomber. They're gone.
Okay.
They're gone.
So there is a perceived loss of physical safety, and they perceive loss of our way of doing things, and so that is the definition of threat. And when I do my research, I come across a term that's interesting. It's called racial stamina. It's a phrase coined by the author of the book, White Fragility. And it's developed due to repeated exposure to small racial discomfort. So if a person have a lot of interaction with minorities, has experienced a lot of racial discomfort, he developed this racial stamina. And if he has high racial stamina, the racial discomfort would not affect their reaction when they run into a racial situation, a situation they need to handle due to different race, and they can handle it appropriately. The person with low racial stamina cannot deal with it and end up overreacting. Okay, and overreacting can be another form of abuse. It's that it's just a small trigger will trigger a big, huge reaction. Okay, because they don't have that inhibition in place. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the type of mistreatments. The first type is marginalization, which I already discussed, is due to feelings of discomfort with people who are different from us. Okay, and the second one is indifference or suffering or lack of affinity, which means there's a lack of feelings of empathy, which lead to indifference to suffering. So that means a suffering minority may not elicit as much compassion in us as somebody in our in-group. Okay, and I heard about this, say, in UK. They have Syrian refugees, they have refugees from Ukraine. People don't really help the Syrian refugees that much, but they help the Ukraine refugee more. It's all because the Syrian is from a different race. And there has been a lot of study that study the quality of the care, the medical care that received by minority patients. And the study found that the minority patient receive is often less than white patients. And that, for me, that's also another breakdown of empathy. So another common mistreatment is called distrust, and it doesn't get to be known very often, or people don't talk about it. And the distrust can cause by the mentality of zero-sum game. You know, we don't want to lose our privilege because you gain the privilege, you're going to hurt me, you know. An in-group versus out-group mentality that I talked about earlier, that groups are not friendly toward each other, okay? And lack of meaningful contact, which means lack of feelings of affinity, and history, what happened before. And it leads to more scrutiny of the minority, delayed promotion, okay, which I talked about earlier, and distance, because you don't trust this person. Of course, you want a distance from this person. And there's a false accusation and false suspicion. I read Nextdoor, which is the app for the neighbors. And there was one time I saw a post, somebody say that a Latino kid was a dog as a pet, and he put the duck in a very small cage. And the person who posted want people to tell the parents of the kid to put the duck in a bigger cage because it's more humane for the duck. There's nothing wrong about this. What's wrong is another post. And another post say that, well, this kid raised the duck for the sake of eating it later. Okay, so he intend to kill the duck and eat it. And that I just don't understand. First of all, children do not raise things in anticipating they will eat them later. That's not how children are. And even for the adults, it doesn't make sense. You know how much work it is to raise a duck and kill it? It's too much work. Just pluck the feathers. It's a huge amount of work. Okay, so this accusation is totally false. But somehow people feel it's true because it's another minority. Somehow they just have a suspicion that they are somehow evil. So that's a manifestation of distrust. And also a suspicion. You know, I personally have experienced suspicion before, so I definitely know it's there. So another mistreatment is impose or inappropriate desire upon a different race. Okay, so this is based on my own observation. I have three common problematic desires in organizations. One is desire to feel superior. The other one is desire to be seen as authority figures. The third one is desire to have inappropriate control. The people who want to feel superior, they tend to look at all your negative qualities. They totally ignore your positive qualities because they have a desire to feel superior. And the people who have desire to be seen as an authority figure will tend to think that, oh, this person doesn't know very much. I need to teach this person. I need to correct them. And I do not want them to discuss things with me because when they discuss with me, I'm no longer an authority figure. I'm their equal. Okay. And the desire to have improper control, we do talk about it in our society, so I don't need to talk about more. So this kind of desire is usually imposed on somebody who has less power. In an organization that's mostly white, it's the minority who has least amount of power in that organization. So they feel more of this, that people impose themselves on them more than other people. So another mistreatment is aggression, which we have heard a lot. Okay, and what other causes aggression is low inhibition plus low feelings affinity and threat. Okay, and our newspaper talk about this kind of aggression. But they are much more common, much more smaller kind of aggression. We call it microaggression. And these aggressions are words that's subtle, and it's actually some kind of little insult directed toward the minorities. Okay, so another big subject that we need to look at is poor or low evaluation of people of another race. Okay, and so evaluation is actually very important. It affects how we hire people, how we promote people, whether we will recognize people and what to recognize. It may not just be in a work environment. It could be in a nonprofit organization where volunteers do works. So people tend to evaluate their in-group people higher than the out-group people. And they tend to give more individuation, which means they see their in-group people as distinct people. They have distinct traits, they have distinct characteristics. But when they evaluate all group people, they tend to use label. Yeah, this is another Asian woman. Okay. Oh, this is not a Black man. And the evaluation tend to be lower, which I talked about before, which is kind of human nature. And they also tend to use a prototype of their group success as a criteria. And this is called in-group projection model. And I'm going to talk about this in-group projection model. So say managers want to promote people to be managers. And they look for quality of good managers. Where do they look? They look at their own group's past good managers. And they look at it and say, oh, these good managers share these characteristics. Therefore, if other the minority group managers should have this characteristic for them to be successful. But the truth isn't that way, okay? The successful manager of one group does not necessarily share the same characteristic of the successful manager of the other group. But because this phenomenon, we have something called bamboo ceiling, which means the East Asians are less likely to be promoted than white men and white women. East Asians are Chinese, Taiwanese, Korean, Japanese. Okay. They are often being seen as non-assertive. And do they really not know how to manage? So there is a recent study that says that using an objective performance matrix, the performance of these Asian managers is just the same as all the other managers. So the problem of this East Asian manager is not because they are not good. It's because how people see it. Somehow people use a certain criteria that's kind of what they don't care. And so they are not being evaluated very fairly. So I'm done with mistreatment, and now I want to talk about the benefit of diversity. In a homogeneous environment where everybody is similar, people tend not to think very hard, and they tend to agree with each other. In a diversified environment, people tend to stay in the analytical mode. That means instead of looking people as their race or their label, they look at the idea. Because if they have to care about all these categories, like this label, that label, is too tiresome. It's easier just look at the idea. So they are more focused on idea. They can see who has better ideas, and they also can see what idea is better. That lean in to give the right job to the right person and have better result. And when I read about this, and I thought, that is not my experience. I used to work in a very diversified environment, and I didn't see this phenomenon. So for this phenomenon to work, there has to be a way for people to show their ability. So if, say, you are an engineer, software engineer, all you do is taking the project the manager gave you and work on it by yourself, you don't have a way to show people your ability because people don't really know how difficult your project is. And also it needs discussion. It needs some kind of friction between different members to show people who has good idea and who has good performance. So the last slide is awareness, which is my hope for my own presentation. So understanding is only the beginning of awareness. And to have the true awareness, we need to reflect upon our own value, thinkings, and preferences. Like, what race do I have feelings of affinity? What race that we don't? We feel threatened by certain race. In what way? And how do we treat a minority in our life? And how do we evaluate them? Do we see them as a category, or do we see them as an individual? And do we have enough racial stamina, which means if we run into difficulty with other race, are we going to stay in control? So that's my presentation. And thank you for giving me the chance to present it. I wanted to tell you that these are not just my own observations, and these are what the people who study the subject of psychology, organization psychology, also agree with me. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Why don't you announce the 2-minute limit and all that stuff now?
Hey, yeah,
Again,
I want to repeat what I said earlier. Try to limit your questions or comments to 2 minutes, and try not to comment on other people's responses. Avoid crosstalk, because that becomes a conversation between two people. Also, I've set my alarm for 12:20 so that we can wind up by 12:30 if necessary. Anyway, I want to thank you for an interesting talk. I think we have a lot to think about. Speaking for myself, I'm always surprised when I realize that I've got some stereotype I didn't realize I was using. And it's something you sort of have to watch for. Yeah, there's a subtle difference between, affiliate identity and passive identity. And I suppose we all belong to a lot of groups or have a lot of identities that we're not mostly aware of.
I have to make comments.
Yeah, Carl?
Yeah, one of the things I noticed as I've grown older is that, if I get to know a person, I tend to give them much more space to be who they are. And for people that I don't know, then that's when I do more and more categorizing. I don't know if the rest of you do that, but when you become familiar with an actual other human being, and like for example, the first time I met a gay person, I never knew a gay person my entire life. So anyhow, and then after a period of years, I started just accepting gay people. In fact, maybe some of them I thought were better than most regular people, which is another story, because most of them have reviewed their life pretty thoroughly. Anyway, I just wanted to make that comment. I don't know if you had that experience too, Emma.
So I would like to make a comment on what Alex said earlier, that you say that you're aware that you have certain stereotype. I want to tell you that there has been a study about people who realize they are racist. And they find that people who realize they are racist are actually less racist than people who think they are not racist. So it's our awareness that make us less racist. So it's good to have that awareness of our own not so good tendencies. Let's see. Is there a question for me?
Yes, Dana or Jerry.
Oh, hi. Yes. Thank you, Emma, for a really good discussion of this and courageous actually to get up in front of a bunch of men mostly and talk about this subject, which is so complex and pointing out, all the different kinds of ways that it affects people. And so I wanted to say you did a really good job of discussing this. Thank you for doing that. And, it seems odd that we should have to have this problem here in California where there are so many different kinds of people. Because, some of us grew up in places where I never saw a person from another racial group until I was a teenager, because everybody was the same where I grew up, and they were all white people and mostly from Scandinavian countries. And so coming to California, it seems like should be a a really good place for people to get to know each other. But apparently that doesn't always happen because of the reasons that you brought out. Anyway, thank you for your presentation.
I just wanted to mention, if you have such a strong interest in racism, you might also want to learn about rankism. Racism is just one aspect of rankism. I'm done.
What's rankism?
Rankism is sort of rankism is basically a unified theory of all the different biases we have, like sexism, ageism, racism. There's at least a half a dozen of them, and you can find out more by going to the website breakingranks.net. I think it's an excellent resource. And in fact, I learned about this from a humanist forum that happened, I don't know, 20 years ago or so. It was presented by Robert Filler, came up with the idea. And yeah, Greg's just put something up about rankism. So I don't think I need to say anymore.
Jerry, I totally agree with you. I do think people don't evaluate just one aspect of a person. They evaluate everything, their age, their gender, how much money they have, and they come up with some kind of evaluation based on a lot of different things.
Yeah, rankism does more than that. It points out, they talk about nobodies and somebodies. And I think part of what's helpful about this site is that if you can realize that you're somebody in one area and a nobody in another area, you might end up being a little more empathetic to the nobodies in your own area.
Okay.
Thinking about unnoticed prejudice, I know if I'm debating someone, it's much easier to debate someone who's shorter than I am. I don't know why that is, but
that way.
the other comment, when I growing up on the East Coast in New Jersey, we ethnic jokes were very common, and I was with a small enough ethnic group that there weren't any jokes about us.
Wait,
The
white man? What?
No. Well, everyone was white. Come on, except for a few people who weren't. Kanita.
It occurred to me that some of these will interact. I mean, I know that I interact more positively with people that I consider have more education, but there are different aspects that will give people more opportunities for education. Like, African Americans have less opportunity to go to prestigious schools that cost more money. And so being African American feeds into being less affluent, feeds into not getting the education, so on. So these things seem to interact and I know, potentiate each other. And I was wondering, what can help with that.
Thank you, Kanita. Yeah. What's your name?
Sheila.
Sheila.
Yeah, I would just say that there's a principle that says that correlation does not equal causality. And we tend to think in that direction, that if some things are correlated, like we might observe that African Americans may be less educated, it doesn't mean that, and therefore, if they're more educated than or less educated, then they are less intelligent. But the correlation between those things doesn't mean that because they're African American, they don't have the capacity to be more intelligent. And I'd also just like to offer, I'm reading this book right now that I think is really good. It's called Good Reasonable People. You may be familiar with it. It's written by a social psychologist about the psychology behind the the divisiveness that we have, but people's sort of natural tendencies to group and judge by perceived likenesses or differences.
Thank you. Zen.
Yeah, thank you, Emma. It's a wonderful presentation that you gave. Um, I'm thinking back to when I saw a black person for the first time. I was born in Poland, and I saw it on an album cover that my father brought from England. The album was the soundtrack to the musical Hair, and on it was a beautiful young black lady with beautiful hair. And the reason I bring this up is because this causes me distress because I often meet black people, in Silicon Valley and elsewhere, and I always want to compliment them on their hair because they have beautiful hair, and I never know what to do because my intentions are noble. I'm not, I'm trying to say something positive, but it is sort of a some sort of a categorization that I'm engaging in, right? And I never know how to navigate this. Thoughts? I just don't know. I'm curious what people think.
Speaking for myself, every now and then I notice some trait in a person. Often it's the language they speak, and I'll ask them what language that is because I'm curious, and they're always happy to tell me. There isn't any resentment about that. I also spoke to a woman once. I noticed that when she was signing for a credit card in front of me, she signed from right to left.
What?
So I asked why. How do you do that? And she was Israeli, where they write from right to left instead of left to right. Did I see the hand here? Well, Warren.
Yeah, thank you. And I'd also like to thank the speaker for her presentation. And I have a question for Emma. Do you believe that racism can exist among other populations? Could an Asian person be racist, an African American person? The talk, it was about racism on the part of white people.
Yeah, it does exist. And I can tell you in China, they have Caucasian as well. Okay, the Caucasian is located on the west side of China. And the Caucasians get some benefit. And the Chinese, like, this is not fair. Like when they take examination, the government give them more scores. And the Chinese say, this is not fair. Okay, it's very similar to Americans. So I want to apologize using the word white, okay, because that's my wall at this moment. So I tend to use white that represent the majority, but it's not white. It's about the majority, the one who have the majority, also the one who has power, okay? And definitely Chinese can be racist. Asians can be racist. Black people can be racist too. Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
Probably easier to be racist against people you see on a regular basis who are in a lower status than you are. When I was talking about ethnic jokes and growing up, we used to tell a lot of them, but they were about other white groups, which I never saw a big division between them. So it was sort of is fun, kind of a fun thing to do to identify someone. And I was surprised when someone told me that my joke offended him. All jokes about other people, it's because they're dumb. Whoever they are, whatever group they are, the joke is that they're dumb.
So I want to comment on what Zan asked earlier about whether it is appropriate for him to compliment the hair of Black people. I think it's totally appropriate. Racism I mean, if you have a narrow definition, it includes the positive stereotype. But racism, when racism become problematic, is usually involved in negative stereotype. And I should have talked more about stereotype because it's also a very important part of racism. And I somehow, it kind of slipped my mind.
Okay. Yeah, Liz.
So I think racism is baked into from evolution. We had primate ancestors and way before that. And the principle was if they're related to you, you take care of them. If they're not, they're resources to be exploited. And that is something that we have to overcome through culture. Um, and deciding what group is the in group versus the out group, I think starts early. And I grew up on the south side of Chicago, and we had about 50% black folks and 50% white folks. And so race didn't really make any sense. It really depends on who you know when you're a toddler, right? And we try to solve, and there's some problems that we're trying to solve, and we have to make sure that we come up with a reasonable solution. Right now, we have a problem that African Americans don't have, um, poor African Americans don't have the opportunity to go to to get a good education. And the underlying problem is that their elementary schools are not very good. And the way the society should address that is by saying anybody that's poor has access to a great education. To go and give people a poor education and then say, we're going to throw you into Harvard, uh, does not solve the root cause and is indeed going to make them not succeed because you basically it's like breaking someone's leg and then saying we're going to make it up to you by putting you in the Olympics. It's not that you don't have the natural capability, but someone broke your leg. Don't try to fix it through uh, putting them into the Olympics. The other thing,
I see your hand. Zin?
Yeah, I have to take issue with what you said, Alex. I am Polish, and Polish people are dumb. Polak jokes are about dumb people. Irish jokes are different. Jewish jokes are different. Italian, Puerto Rican, black. They're all different. But it's my people who are dumb, and I take a little bit of umbrage that
Excluded you.
you didn't point me out. But I have the following thought. This country, of course, was founded on slavery, on the blood and sweat of people whose skin color was different. And so race is obviously front and center sort of in our collective and individual mindset. But I do wonder if when we say racism today, if this is just not a placeholder for culture and class. For example, Kanida gave the example, and Les also alluded to it, of, African Americans having fewer opportunities, and I believe that's absolutely true. But is it because they are black, or is it because they are poor? Native Americans have even less opportunity. I think they are the most economically disadvantaged group in the United States, right? So I think racism can be used as a placeholder for many things which are actually more complicated. And yes, I've experienced racism myself. Sorry, Emma, but from the Asian community a little bit. I have to admit, and Well, that's what I'll say for now because I can just rant forever. I do have a thought about stereotypes that I will turn to if I get called upon later. I yield the remainder of my time.
Okay, Dana or Jerry? You're still muted.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to go back to commenting about hair and things. I debated that subject because as an ESL teacher, for 23 years, I saw a lot of different kinds of people all the time. Anyway, but if I'm in the market or wherever it is, and I see someone, say at the checkout or something, that has a fabulous hairdo, I do like to say something, because actually, it seems to me that African American people have raised hairdos and fingernails to a higher level. They have fabulous hairdos so intricate that you just have to marvel, how did they get their hair to do that? And also heavily decorated long fingernails. And it's an art form. And I think that it's okay to comment on it personally.
Jerry, were you going to say something? Okay, Les.
I just want to say it was a great presentation. To finish my thought about affirmative action in education, the problem is, as I said, it doesn't solve the problem, and it also creates resentment and reinforces stereotypes. And it's done at the expense of other minorities, such as Asians. And if you look at the justification for keeping Asians out of places like Harvard, they are basically racial stereotypes. They're grudges, they don't have personalities, or I don't know, stuff like that that's being offered, which is just kind of racist excuses that sound good. And the same thing was done with Jews in the 1930s. Um, that is an example of a zero-sum game. There's only so many seats to get into Harvard, and it does not solve the problem. It creates resentments.
Thank you. Senna.
Let's forget the your religion also can be a source of prejudice. We were the only Catholic family in our town when I was growing up, and they definitely were things that were not uh, equal. And basically, that's sort of the Jewish people know all about that. It's very common.
Thank you. Zen.
Yeah, well, maybe I'm getting sort of moral support here about the hair because it is there is, I mean, how to say it, there is sort of a genetic component. I mean, the reason I mentioned the black lady on the album cover is because no Polish person, alive or dead, ever had such hair. It would be technically impossible for them to do so. So there is that's my problem. There is sort of a racist or I don't know, I mean, obviously our genetic variations are tiny relative to our overall person, right? But, I am sort of complimenting on their, you know what I mean? I mean, I recently, actually in this group, I got into trouble because I said nice things about Jewish people, whom I actually admire, but a Jewish lady actually objected to it. And I have to say, in retrospect, I could see that she was right because I was, again, creating a category, even though I was saying good things. I was not, being derisive or, dismissive, but yet, same thing, right? Even if you say good things about someone, that can backfire because it's a stereotype. Obviously, we're Jewish, we have to be smart. I know that's not true. It took me a while, but I did finally meet a stupid Jew in America. It took me a while, but they do exist. But still, the stereotype I have, most Jews that I've met are very sort of erudite, intelligent, interested in the world, and that's a stereotype I have. I would say a positive stereotype, but a stereotype nonetheless. Um, can you say anything nice about anybody? I mean, based on this characteristic, I don't know.
Emma, I see you've had your hand up for a while, and you're an important part of this meeting.
Yeah, I want to share with you my own personal experience. So I was born in Taiwan, and I came here when I was 16 years old. And when I was in Taiwan, I was a good student. And if you ask me why I was a good student, I would say I got good grades because I studied. And after I came over here, we were immigrant. I need to learn English. I need to learn the culture. My family's social status has took a big dive because, whatever money you made in Taiwan is nothing over here. So life has become a lot more tougher. And my parents argue with each other more. And I still wanted to study. I still wanted to get a good grade, but I just found studying was so much more difficult, even with the subject of math. I can tell you that the math I learned in Taiwan is far more advanced than the math I learned in the US. But somehow it just feels difficult. And because that experience, I totally agree. Programs like EOP, Equal Opportunity Program, that give some buoy to students from a disadvantaged background. I didn't qualify for that program because my dad was a college grad. Okay, but I totally believe that if you don't give disadvantaged kids a little buoy, they will stuck in that low social class of their life. Oh, there's another thing I want to tell you is that I developed this mentality. Just within 1 or 2 years, I developed this mentality. I was going to stuck in this low social class all my life. Isn't that funny? I wasn't born into this social class. I just experienced it for 1 or 2 years, and things were so bad. It changed my way of looking at things. So fortunately, things did change, but bootstrapping.
All right, thank you. Paul, you had a comment you want to make.
This is really an aside, but Zim, I do hope that you understand that all of us love your hair.
You love my hair? Thank you, thank you. I do
Or we
try.
say envious. Sheila.
Yeah, I think that it's not that you can't give somebody a compliment if they're part of a group. The problem becomes when you make an assumption about somebody based on their group or based on a stereotype. So people want to be recognized for their individual ability or an individual trait that they have. And so if it's given to the individual, I think it's taken better than if there's an assumption made and says, oh, you're Jewish, you must be smart. Then that's when it becomes more offensive.
That's a great point. Thank you.
Yeah, I think probably the idea behind affirmative action and that sort of thing is that you need really do it helps to provide some positive image for people who identify with a certain group. Yeah, Paul.
I think probably one of the most important things we can learn when considering this subject is that to be prejudiced, this deprives yourself. You're cutting yourself off from some of the most interesting people that you could ever meet. I grew up in West Tennessee, was born in 31. Segregation, it was white and black, was pretty much absolute. There were no people of Asian I'd never seen anyone from Asian background. And it was really, there were a number of things along the way that made it clear that I was missing something. But after graduating from college in West Tennessee, went to Emory in Atlanta for my first year in graduate school. And within the first few days there, a choir from a black women's college performed on campus. And they asked for volunteers. If you had a car, could you give some of the girls a ride home, which is across town from Atlanta? And so I volunteered. And there were these 5 girls that were incredible. I'd never been close to or had conversations like that with black girls. And it was awing. One of the girls lived a few blocks from where my parents lived in Memphis. But I had never really had that contact until I was just thrown into it for that experience.
I find sometimes you're doing something wrong or prejudicial, and you really have to have it pointed out to you sometimes. But I'm not going to go into any examples. Jerry?
It seems to me as though there's a natural tendency in humans to want to improve their own status by using other people, which sometimes leads to abuse. And extreme situations, to justify this abuse, you want to develop negative statements about the people that you're using. And that can happen in a lot of areas, including in corporate America, because I discovered in a company I was at that managers had a low opinion of non-managers, which really wasn't justified in my opinion. I'm done.
I had a close friend. This is quite a while back, like in the 70s, incredibly long ago. But he moved back to India eventually, where he's from. And but we communicated a little bit, and I saw an article he wrote on meritocracy in India. And it seems even there, if your folks are rich, you'll benefit from meritocracy. Yes?
India is the heartland of racism in the sense of the caste system, and the caste system is kind of racism is a form of a caste system, and rich people get rich by exploiting poor people that are not given opportunities and are forced to give up their labor, etc., and treated like dirt.
Although I would like to point out that some rich people are very nice. Emma.
So I want to, there's one phenomena I wanted to bring up for my presentation. I kind of forgot about it. It's how people have been treated. If you have been treated well when you were growing up, you tend to treat other people well. And you know how to be likable too. And the problem with likability is that sometimes it really has nothing to do with this person's character. It has a lot to do with their past. And they are dark people who grew up in a rich family, and people treat them well because they have high status. And these people on the surface, they are very likable, but they exploit other people too. Yeah. So that's so I just want to let you know that likability isn't the best way to evaluate people. The best way is to observe them, to see they have integrity and they do according to what they'll say they will do.
Okay, thank you. I've been reading about different languages, and I read an article about various Indian languages, and in the one of them they pointed out that sarcasm is frowned upon. Saying insulting someone while sounding like you are complimenting was considered an act of cowardice, which I was just a little disappointed. I think I'm good at sarcasm, but
Yeah, right.
Nice self-referential humor there. I like it.
I also like to share with you one thing I learned that I find it very interesting is that peoples are primarily motivated by comfort and status.
yeah, status is good. I gotta admit, okay. Yeah, it's 12:20, and so we're going to wind up now. If there are any last comments anyone wants to make? All right. Emma, thank you for a wonderful talk.
Thank you for giving me the chance to talk.
Jerry, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment about status. One time I was at work and there was somebody talking. The other people were talking about status, and one person said to another, "Well, Jerry doesn't care about status. He rides a bike instead of driving a car." And I had to say, "But you don't understand. I got more status in the Green Party by riding a bike than driving a car. So status is complicated." I'm done.
It's like the humbler than thou.
Oh yeah, yeah. I love that story.